Have you ever, tried to be polite in another language, but, maybe it comes out a little wrong?
Yeah, for sure. It's like you want to be respectful, but the words just don't sound right.
Exactly. So today, let's look at some ways to make your English sound more polite, more friendly.
Okay, sounds good.
We're going to be using tips from English Speak Daily.
Okay.
It's a language learning podcast hosted by Chris and Taylor.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, they've got some pretty interesting stuff. In one episode, they were talking about requests.
Okay.
And how sometimes even simple requests can sound like demands.
Yeah.
For example, they give the example of, give me the menu.
Right.
Now, to a native English speaker, that can sound kind of direct.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
A little too direct, almost rude even.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And so Chris and Taylor were saying that that's where the idea of indirectness comes in.
Indirectness, okay.
Yeah. So in English-speaking cultures, indirect language is often viewed.
I see.
Especially when you're in a formal setting or talking to someone you don't know very well.
Right.
So how can we make that request for the menu sound more polite?
Well, they suggest a simple change. Instead of, give me the menu, you could say, could I see the menu, please?
Could I see the menu, please?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're adding could and please.
Exactly. Those two little words make a huge difference.
Because could makes it less of a demand.
Right, more of a request.
And please, of course, is that universal sign of respect.
Right, softens the tone, shows you're asking, not ordering.
It's amazing how much two words can change the whole tone.
It really is.
Now, what about saying no politely? When someone asks you to do something, but you just can't.
Oh, yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah, but you don't want to be rude about it.
Right, exactly.
So Chris and Taylor were talking about this too.
Okay.
They said that just saying, I can't help you, can sound very blunt.
Yeah, a little harsh, even if you don't mean it that way.
Right, you don't even care. So what do they suggest instead?
Well, they recommend saying something like, I'd love to help, but I'm a bit busy right now.
I'd love to help, but I'm a bit busy right now.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. That sounds much more empathetic.
You're acknowledging their request,
Yeah.
but you're giving a reason why you can't do it.
And it's not just a flat no.
Yeah, you're showing you understand their situation.
This is really interesting.
It is. It's like politeness is a form of empathy.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and it applies to declining invitations too.
Oh, okay.
Instead of saying, I don't want to go.
Which does sound kind of harsh when you say it like that.
It does. Chris and Taylor recommend saying something like, thanks for inviting me, but I can't make it this time.
Thanks for inviting me, but I can't make it this time.
Yeah, you're still showing gratitude even though you're saying no.
That's a great tip. I like that.
It keeps things polite.
And you're giving a reason without over-explaining.
Exactly, just a brief explanation.
This is giving me a lot to think about.
Me too.
What about you? What stood out to you the most so far?
Well, what's fascinating to me is this idea of saving face.
Saving face.
Yeah, you're trying to protect the other person's dignity. You don't want to embarrass them or make them uncomfortable.
Oh, I see.
And indirect language is a big part of that.
Like you said before about give me the menu.
Exactly.
Hmm.
That's too direct. Can make someone feel like they're being bossed around.
So it's like you're trying to maintain this sense of harmony even when you have to deliver bad news.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it.
Interesting.
It really shows how important these subtle nuances are.
Yeah, because it can change how you're perceived and how successful you are when you talk to other people.
Right, for sure.
Okay, well, this has been really insightful.
Definitely, I'm learning a lot.
Me too. Let's take a quick break and we'll come back with more tips on how to sound more polite in English.
Sounds good.
So we've talked about softening requests and saying no in a nice way.
Right.
But what about giving suggestions? When you want to offer advice, but you don't want to sound bossy.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a tricky one.
It is. How do you do that without sounding like you're preaching?
Well, Chris and Taylor had some thoughts on this too.
Okay, what did they say?
So they compared saying, you should do this, which can sound pretty strong, to saying something like, maybe you could try this.
Okay.
Or, have you thought about doing this?
Right. Those sound much softer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's less like a command and more like a real suggestion.
It's like you're giving them the option, but they can choose.
Yeah, you're respecting their decision.
Which goes back to that saving face thing.
Right, you're not putting them on the spot.
It's more collaborative.
Exactly.
This is interesting stuff.
It is.
Now, what about when you need to correct someone? They said something wrong, but you don't want to embarrass them.
Oh, yeah, that can be awkward.
It can. How do you handle that?
Well, the podcast pointed out that just saying that's wrong can sound pretty harsh.
It does, yeah. Like you're saying they're stupid or something.
Right, even if you don't mean it that way, it can come across badly.
So what's a better way?
They suggested some alternatives, like, actually, I think it's like this.
Okay.
Or, I might be wrong, but I heard it's like this.
I might be wrong, but I heard it's like this.
Yeah.
I see. So you're leaving room for the possibility that you could be mistaken.
Exactly. It's less confrontational.
It's more like you're working together to figure out the truth.
Right.
Like, hey, let's double check this.
And it also shows that you're willing to be wrong.
Which is important.
It is. It shows humility.
So to recap, we've learned that being polite in English often means using indirect language.
Yeah.
Softening requests, giving reasons when you say no.
Right.
And phrasing suggestions and corrections in a way that respects the other person.
You got it.
Wow, this is a lot to take in.
It is. It's like we're learning all these new tools for politeness.
It's fascinating.
It is. What surprised you the most about all this?
You know what really struck me is how much they talked about tone of voice and body language.
Oh yeah, that's huge.
We've been focusing on the words, but how you say those words makes a big difference too.
For sure. You could say the most polite phrase, but if you say it in a mean way, it's going to sound rude.
Totally. Chris and Taylor were saying that things like facial expressions and eye contact are really important.
Yeah, and your tone of voice should be gentle and respectful.
So it's not just about the words, it's about the whole package.
Exactly. You're communicating so much more than just words.
This is really making me think about how I talk to people.
Me too.
It's like a whole new level of communication.
It is. It's about being aware and considerate.
I like that.
Yeah, it's about building good relationships.
Okay, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
This has been a really interesting deep dive.
I agree.
Let's move on to our final thoughts.
Sounds good.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, like those nonverbal cues can really change how a message comes across.
Yeah, for sure. And it's something to be extra careful about when you're talking to people from different cultures.
That's a really good point, because what might be like a friendly gesture in one culture could be seen as rude in another.
Exactly. And I think that's what's been so interesting about this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
It's not just about learning phrases. It's about understanding, like, the values behind the language.
The cultural context.
Right? Like Chris and Taylor talked about how some cultures are more direct and some are more indirect. Some are formal, some are casual.
It's crazy how these differences can affect how we talk to each other.
It really is.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that you got to be adaptable.
Yeah, and open-minded.
Exactly. And be willing to, like, learn from your mistakes.
Because we all make mistakes, especially when it comes to culture.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But if you're open to feedback, you can learn and grow.
I like that. So as we wrap up this deep dive into English politeness, what are some key things you think our listeners should remember?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that politeness isn't just about saying please and thank you. It's about thinking about the other person's feelings, respecting their point of view, and trying to create a positive atmosphere.
That's a great way to put it. It's about being kind and considerate no matter who you're talking to.
Exactly.
And you know what? Mastering these politeness skills can actually help you in all sorts of ways.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It can make you a better communicator.
It can help you build stronger relationships.
It can make you more successful in life.
So listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive and that you've learned some useful tips along the way.
We had a great time talking about this.
Me too. And remember, politeness is a journey, not a destination.
That's a good one.
So keep learning, keep practicing, and keep being awesome.
We'll see you on our next deep dive.
Bye, everyone.